All right, good evening, everyone. We are at just after 6 o'clock, so in interest of everyone's time, I'm going to go ahead and get this neighborhood meeting started. So hopefully everyone can hear me okay. Looks like my audio is on and everything. So good evening, everyone. My name is Hannah Oden, and I am a senior planner with the town of Oro Valley and the town's project manager reviewing the applicant's proposal. I will also be facilitating tonight's meeting. Thank you for joining us for the second neighborhood meeting regarding the proposed general plan amendment and rezoning for a commercially zoned, so similar to the Safeway across Tangerine Road, and vacant property located near the southeast corner of the North First Avenue and Tangerine Road intersection. And as a reminder to participants, the applicant is proposing to change two special area policies of the general plan to allow residential uses on the subject parcel. The applicant is also proposing to rezone the property from commercial to multifamily residential to allow residential uses such as apartments, townhomes, senior care, and single-family homes. The applicant will be providing more information about their proposal during their presentation. Okay, next slide, please. Thank you. So the first fully interactive Zoom neighborhood meeting for this project was held in May. And at that time, we had hoped and anticipated holding this meeting in person if it was safe to do so. Unfortunately, due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and social distancing requirements, the decision was made to also hold this meeting via Zoom to protect the safety of town residents. At this point, you may be familiar with online interactive Zoom meetings, but I will provide more information about how Zoom works and how to participate shortly. Our number one goal tonight is to hear from you while ensuring a fair, efficient, and productive meeting. Now, you've heard a lot from the applicant regarding their proposal and from the town regarding the process. So tonight is another opportunity for you to directly share your concerns and ask questions. Now, we're going to do our best to get through as many questions and comments as we can tonight. Now, everyone's microphone, other than myself, will be muted throughout the meeting tonight, unless it's your turn to speak. And this is to ensure a smooth and efficient meeting as possible. Only I can turn on your microphone at the appropriate time when it's your turn, at which point you will be able to ask a question or provide comments. And this will also be the same for your video. Your video will be off unless it's your turn to speak, at which point I will turn it on as you are providing comments or asking a question. Again, this is to keep the meeting fair and focused. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Zoom, I will be providing a quick how-to on raising your computer or telephone activated virtual hand when you have a question. So tonight's meeting is scheduled to go no later than 8 p.m. And I'd like to note that this Zoom meeting video and PowerPoint presentation will be posted on this project's webpage as soon as possible. We have found that Zoom takes a few days to process the recording. However, we will post it immediately once we receive it. Comments will also be posted online on the project webpage in a neighborhood meeting summary and forwarded to the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council when they consider the applications. Okay, next slide, please. So where are we in the process? So we've produced two informational videos that have been posted on this project's webpage on ovprojects.com. I hope all of you have seen those videos as they contain detailed information about the applicant's proposal and the process. In May, we held the first fully interactive Zoom neighborhood meeting. And that video is also posted on ovprojects.com, and I encourage you to watch it if you haven't already. This evening, we intend to build on the information provided in those videos and questions and comments raised during the first neighborhood meeting, with the aim to make this meeting more productive. After tonight's meeting, we anticipate another fully interactive Zoom neighborhood meeting in September if there are substantial issues that have not been addressed by the applicant. And as a reminder to all participants, it is the applicant's charge to create, justify, and seek Town Council approval of their proposal. If a meeting in September is necessary, yellow card notices will be sent out in advance of this meeting, so please be on the lookout for those. If you have not received a postcard for this project in the recent past and would like to, please email ask@orovalleyaz.gov to be sure you get one for the upcoming neighborhood meetings mailing list. Yellow signs with meeting information will also be posted on the subject property. The general plan amendment and rezoning applications are scheduled for 2 meetings before the Planning and Zoning Commission, and those will take place in October and November. Lastly, Town Council will consider the requests at a public hearing in December. And per state law, Town Council must consider a general plan amendment in the same calendar year that it is submitted. So the hearing scheduled in December will satisfy the state mandated requirement. Okay, next slide, please. So again, the purpose of this meeting is to build upon the 2 videos and first neighborhood meeting that have generated a number of questions and comments. And most importantly, provide you an opportunity to share your comments and have your questions answered directly. The agenda for tonight's meeting is that first, the applicant's representative, Mr. Paul Oland, is going to provide a brief overview of the project. Since the informational videos in the first neighborhood meeting, the applicant has submitted a formal rezoning application and associated site analysis, which is posted online at ovprojects.com. And next, it will be your turn. So at this point, I'd also like to provide some information on what we have done with the questions and comments received to date and the plan for those moving forward. First, your first round of questions and comments were used as the foundation for the second video posted on April 30th. Again, if you haven't seen that video, please visit ovprojects.com to do so. These questions were also used as the basis for the first neighborhood meeting. And tonight we are using these questions as well as the questions and comments raised during the first neighborhood meeting as the basis for the meeting tonight. From all the comments we received, staff does anticipate that there are at least 4 core topics that you will bring forward tonight. So these include additional development on this property, compatibility with surrounding neighbors, especially concerning views, the impact of adding traffic to North First Avenue, as well as safety and access to Tangerine Road, as well as the economic impact of the proposal to surrounding commercial areas. Questions and comments are certainly not limited to this list, but we know that they have been frequently mentioned and look forward to the upcoming discussion. We've asked the applicant to be prepared and have also invited key town staff representatives. Tonight, it is your chance to hear from the applicant about how these issues are being addressed. I do want to emphasize that your feedback is critical in helping shape an ultimate proposal that will be considered by Town Council. Public participation has shaped every general plan amendment and rezoning application in Oro Valley, and we expect this one will be no different. So it's important to stay engaged in the process. And third, following your questions and comments, I'll provide more information about the next steps. And fourth and lastly, I'll then conclude by reiterating upcoming opportunities for public participation. Okay, next slide, please. All right, thank you. I'd now like to turn it over to the applicant, Mr. Paul Oland, for his presentation. Mr. Oland, please focus on why the proposal is being presented and how the core topics are being addressed. Okay, Mr. Oland, let me just unmute you here. Okay, and I will start your video here as well. All right, Mr. Oland, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Ms. Oden. My name is Paul Oland with Paradigm Land Design. I'm representing the property owner on this application. And I will keep it brief. I know that most people on this meeting call have probably reviewed the information online, so I'll try not to duplicate much of that, but I would like to hit on some of the high points. So this parcel is part of a larger land holding that the Kai family has owned for over half a century. It's mostly developed. The sanctuary at Silverhawk Development south of Palisades Road and then the 3 phases of the Villages at Silverhawk development north of Palisades. All of those have been developing over the last few years since we rezoned. And I should mention that within the overall property, about a third of it has been set aside as open space. So that's a large percentage for an infill piece. The existing zoning is commercial, C1 commercial per the Oro Valley zoning code. It, and along with block 4, which is the piece to the west, you can see the subject property is the one with the star on it. Block 4 is the one immediately west. Both are zoned C1 commercial. We believe block 4 will be viable someday to support commercial use. But block 5, we do not. We don't believe it is likely to ever be viable under its existing zoning, which is why we're proposing to change the entitlements on it to allow a use that is viable, that will be compatible with the surrounding neighborhoods and also will benefit the town and surrounding retailers. The reasons why block 5 we believe will not ever be viable are several. One, very poor visibility. Of course, that's critical to retail success. This piece here is over 1,000 feet from the intersection of Tangerine and First, relative to the other commercial pieces, which you can see on this slide here. It's got the worst visibility of them. The red areas on this slide amount to about 80 acres of existing commercial zoned land just at this intersection. About a third of it is developed. The other 2/3 is not developed. And the third that is developed, the Safeway shopping center, and then the one with the hardware store and the drugstore on the southwest corner, excuse me. Those are, from a retail standpoint, fairly marginal. They do not do a lot of business, and that's mostly because of the lack of residential density in the retail service area. All of these properties, with the exception of this subject property and block 4 to the west, have been zoned commercial for decades. So there have been several market cycles up and down where there have been opportunities to develop these as commercial. These have certainly been offered for sale by a number of different owners, and there simply is no demand for anywhere near this amount of commercial acreage at this corner. What we do have are struggling retailers who need more shoppers at this particular corner. So that really is part of why we're proposing this, because we think that, again, the viability is there, the market is there, and there's also a significant benefit that could be had. The density in the area, I mentioned it's low. It's also not expected to get any more. When we rezoned this commercial property and the block 4 to the west, there were still several residential parcels in the, maybe within a half a mile or a mile that had not yet been developed, mostly to the north. Those have since been developed at standard Oro Valley densities. Nothing wrong with that, but they're not high density, and they don't provide a lot of rooftops and shoppers to support those retailers. So what's happened since the rezoning is that we've really realized that the door has been shut on additional density, which effectively shuts the door on retail viability at this location. However, medium density and high density senior care are viable uses. There's definitely a market for them, a demand for them. They are appropriate for this location here. This is a transitional location between medium density uses and major roadway, arterial, and other commercial uses. This is a great parcel for a transitional mid-density use. The economic impact has been something that we didn't touch on in previous presentations. We have actually commissioned an economic impact study to be prepared, analyzing our proposed uses compared to what's existing, what's allowed. We think this will validate what we have come to conclude over the years about the viability of this as retail. It may not, but we really expect it to. And basically what I expect the study will show, and again, once that's done, it'll be submitted to the town, is that C1 commercial and some of the tech park uses that are now allowed on this parcel as of very recently, that the zoning code was amended, that those are theoretically, they have a great economic impact. Problem is there's little to no demand for any of those uses at this location. We've already talked about the lack of commercial demand at this location. There's a lot of undeveloped tech park land just down the hill around the hospital, around Ventana, and in Innovation Park. There's a lot of better positioned tech park land down there. And what we found too over the years is that a lot of tech park users don't want to be next to residences. And of course, this piece is surrounded by residential on two sides. In fact, years and years ago, the town condemned a residential subdivision that had been approved and platted and started construction in Innovation Park because Ventana Medical realized what was going on and absolutely did not want to be that close to neighbors because they realized there's an incompatibility there. So this piece here, great piece for transitional residential density, alternative transitional use, not a great piece for commercial or tech park. Senior care, admittedly, has a relatively low potential economic benefit, but there is strong demand, and it is fulfilling a need in that market sector, which we'll get to in a couple slides here. Medium density residential, which is what I would call the villages at Silverhawk, which is what surrounds it on two sides. There's already a number of homes that have been built. That has more of an economic benefit, and there's also strong demand. This could very easily be phase 4 of the villages at Silverhawk. That is a potential that the home building community would jump on. So there's better economic impact, high demand, so the potential economic impact realizable is better. And again, the realizable economic impact of C1 and Tech Park on this is almost nothing. And then on the other end of the spectrum, you've got higher density residential townhomes, rental casitas, we'll talk about these in a minute, or apartments, where you've got a high economic impact and a high demand. So the reasonably realizable economic impact is high. We think that's the highest and best use for this property. It's appropriate, and it benefits not only the surrounding retailers, but it's also appropriate and compatible with surrounding uses. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in a nutshell, a little more than 15 years ago, the general plan was amended to include a number of special area policies that were applied to the entire Kai property that I mentioned before. They included designating this piece as commercial. And there were a number of other policies having to do with residential density and hillside preservation and wash corridor preservation and things like that, building heights, setbacks, things like that. Those have all been abided by, of course, as we've rolled through the development on the residential side. This piece, however, of course, was designated as commercial at the time. It seemed like this would be viable in the future. There was a lot more vacant, undeveloped residential land in Oro Valley. But as I said before, since then, it's in the nearby vicinity here, there's virtually no more residential land left, so it's no longer viable for commercial. I want to point out on this slide too that this is the tentative development plan from the approved rezoning. It shows single access point onto First Avenue. It does not show any reliever access onto Tangerine. We are proposing to change that. That's actually already been worked into the design of the subdivisions, and we'll see that on a later slide. But the access is certainly now improved as proposed than it was in 2015 when this was rezoned. The uses allowed under existing zoning, 25-foot building height, and typical of C1 zoning, which is retail stores, restaurants, bars, daycare, auto parts, and rental, miscellaneous services, things like that. Again, not a lot of demand for that here, but that's what it's zoned for. It also carries with it a 20% open space requirement. The R6 zone that we're proposing has a 35% open space. So there will be more open space within this parcel under the proposed zone than the existing. And of course, you add that to the large amount of open space that's already been designated within the overall historic Kai property. Next slide, please. So I mentioned existing businesses are struggling. due to low residential density and Amazon, of course. The retail service area that's needed to support any business nowadays is much bigger, requires many more rooftops than it did 10 years ago. Amazon has slurped up much of the retail market, and it's made it even more difficult for local brick and mortar retailers. That's not news or debated. That's of course just a fact. And the evidence here on this slide here, you've got the Oro Valley Marketplace, which is undergoing a redo to actually add more residential, among other things. And the Bashas Shopping Center and Rooney Ranch, all of them have lost major anchor tenants, which just underscores how unviable it would be to get a bigger user on this piece. And you need a bigger user, you need an anchor user to have any sort of retail activity. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is just a close-up of the current configuration. You can see the Kai Drive loop road there does not go straight in and dead end anymore. It goes up and will eventually connect to Tangerine, contrary to how it used to be shown. When we were platting the residential portions, we realized that single point of entry onto First Avenue was really going to create probably a big problem from a traffic standpoint. So we started looking at running a loop up to Tangerine. A piece of county property was actually purchased in order to make this connection possible. The Kai family purchased a triangle from Pima County there so that we could make this connection. It does fit in with the overall property here. The traffic analysis has been completed in the past for this loop connection, and it's been demonstrated to be quite an improvement over what was approved during the rezoning. A traffic analysis has been also completed for this, which we'll get to in a minute. I also want to mention that any of this infrastructure, of course, per Oro Valley requirements, is developer funded. New roads, utilities, etc., is all built by the developer as development requires it. The other thing I'd like to point out here is that the connection to Tangerine, as proposed, would be a right in, right out, left in. So people traveling westbound on Tangerine would be able to turn in to this loop road, but people exiting this property would not be able to make a north and then westbound left, because that typically creates a lot of traffic conflict. So we're proposing a 3/4 intersection because we believe that is a good fit. And then I'll just point out one more time, this piece here is 1/3 of a mile from the intersection, and it's not actually on Tangerine or First. So again, distance, proximity, visibility, all critical for C1 use to be viable. This piece doesn't have it. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that an updated traffic study has been completed for this proposal. They analyzed how the proposed uses from high density residential, medium density residential, senior care, how those compare to what's already been approved, what's existing zoning, which is of course the C1 commercial. What they found was that the traffic volume is slightly higher if apartments are built, but it's spread out over the course of the day. So the peaks are not as pronounced, and the overall impact is fairly equivalent. Of course, if this rezoning is successful, and for whatever reason, the medium density single family or senior care were to be built, that would of course have a lower traffic impact than the commercial. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the first of several proposed site plans that we're including in this rezoning request. This would be for an apartment option, 2 stories. And again, I mentioned this before, but I think it's important. The general plan states more than once that a goal of the town should be to provide a full spectrum of housing options. That means that it needs to meet the demand of the residents. Now, in Oro Valley, there are about a dozen complexes, apartment complexes. They have strong rents regionally. They have very strong occupancy rates. They're averaging about 95%, which in apartment lingo is full, because there's normal turnover in there. And because of the strength of the rents and the demand for apartment space, most of the people, or I should say your typical apartment dwelling person, or household unit, family, whatever you want to call it, is there by choice in Oro Valley. Most of the people who are dwelling in Oro Valley apartments can afford a house if they wanted to. They can't afford to purchase a residence, so they are renters by choice for whatever reason, their phase of life, their job situation, whatever. They choose to live in apartments, and that is what creates the demand and the strong rents. So this would be, as apartments are in Oro Valley, an amenitized development, rec area, clubhouse, gated, and of course there would be a huge benefit to local businesses, because this is more people per acre than your typical single family house. So this is the kind of development that local struggling businesses really need more of. And there's really no negative impact to this. It's already zoned for commercial. It's a transitional land use piece. It's a good place for a higher density residential product with good access to goods and services, commercial land, and major transportation infrastructure. Next slide, please. This is our second development proposal, or option, if you will. This would be a single story rental casita product. There are a number of these that have been very, very successful around town, up in Phoenix as well. Gated, amenitized just like the apartments, with a rec area, lots of landscaping, buffer yards, setbacks, all that sort of thing. And again, the rents in these developments are typically strong, and their occupancy rates are high. And again, the operators of these facilities tend to find that most of their renters are there by choice, because they could afford to purchase a residence if they wanted to. Just like apartments, this one is very beneficial to local businesses. We think our economic impact analysis that's currently in process, in production, will be proving that. And there's really no negative impact to this one as well. Next slide, please. Senior care, I mentioned before that the potential economic impact is lower, of course, for senior care, because there's not as much spending going on by the residents, but this is fulfilling a significant need regionally, and it's been evidenced in Oro Valley over the last few years with the number of senior care facilities that have been built. There are about 10,000 Americans turning 65 every day. That's going to continue for more than a decade, statistically. So that demand is not expected to decrease. Typically, the way these facilities are arranged, you'll have a main building that's a couple of stories that'll house assisted living, memory care, and some independent living units. And then it will be the perimeter of the property will feature single story independent living casitas. And increasingly, seniors are choosing this sort of, it's almost a resort style campus, because the maintenance is low. It is affordable with the proceeds that many people have from the houses that they've owned for a long time. And it also provides a wide range of care services. So a spouse can be living here who maybe one spouse requires more care than the other. They can both live here, receive the appropriate levels of care. There's actually a lot of seniors in Oro Valley living in these who have family who also live, children and their children, grandkids living in Oro Valley. They can live close, and knowing that their aging parents are receiving the care that they need in a comfortable, pleasant, and pretty environment. So lots of activities at these, low traffic impact, super quiet neighbor, really no negative impact to this one as well. Next slide, please. This is an option for a two-story townhome. It's more of a medium density, obviously less than apartments or the rental casitas, but more than a single family housing unit. Beneficial to local businesses from an aesthetic standpoint, very similar to single family. You'll have landscape buffer yards, individual units, central rec area, most likely gated, good access to arterial roads. Again, no negative impact Next slide, please. This is the last option. We are including this because we know that it is viable. And although aside from senior care, we expect this would deliver the least of the economic benefits, we know that this is a very viable use. It is certainly absolutely compatible because it's identical to what's being built around it. It would essentially be the next phase of the villages. It would, of course, have a benefit to local businesses, not as much as apartments or a higher density, but still every rooftop counts for these local businesses that are struggling, especially right at the corner there, where people would be able to actually walk to some of those businesses. They're close enough, they're far enough away to make the commercial viability none, but they're close enough to walk or bike to those businesses. Again, no negative impact here. Next slide, please. Thank you. The question of visibility from Tangerine Road has come up several times. So you can see the subject property clearly labeled here in blue. There's a large ridge, which is, I've colored orange on this picture, which blocks visibility of the property entirely from Tangerine. And if you can picture it, of course, Tangerine Road is dropping down toward the bridge over Big Wash at that location. So while this property is staying a little higher, Tangerine's dropping off, plus you've got this ridge line, you can't see it. The purple dot, as you're traveling east on Tangerine, that's about where you lose visibility of the site, slightly diagonal. Once you're east of that dot, I can't see the property at all. You can see it from the intersection of First and Tangerine, but again, over 1,000 feet away and a little bit lower than the intersection, and no negative visual impacts there. Next slide, please. Thank you. Question of proximity has come up. You can see here the distance to existing homes. Up in Vistoso, of course, you're almost a half a mile away. To the homes on the other side of First Avenue, we're more than 1,000 feet away. To the new homes that have just been built in Villages Phase 2, just to the southwest of us, we're at least 350 feet away to the very closest one. And all the rest of the homes there are, of course, further away. And the other thing I should point out is that, of course, the predominant view, the great view that people pay extra money for in this part of town, actually pretty much all of Ore Valley, is, of course, towards Bush Ridge. So this property has no residences to the west of it that will have any impact to their views. And also existing distance to the Palisades subdivisions is a little more than 800 feet, and you cannot see it. There's a low ridge line there just west of those existing homes. You cannot see this property, and even if you could, you can see the graded area on this slide here to the south and to the east of the subject property. That will be filled up with homes as well. So no negative visual impact to anybody on the development of this property, even if it was developed as commercial under existing zoning. But certainly the way we're proposing it, no impact. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is a picture I took from Tangerine Road. You can see it's a little bit silly, but you can see the ridge line and you cannot see the property behind it. Needs no further explanation. Next slide, please. This is a picture taken from First Avenue. You can see the tall cell tower in the background there. Of course, this is due west of the subject property. And if you look close, you can see 3 little yellow lines out in the distance there. Those are placed, those are 25-foot tall poles representing where the buildings would go if they are built at 2-story. Again, if it got built as single family, some of those would be single, some of those would be 2-story. If it got built as the rental casita option, for example, that would all be single story. But if it is one of the development options that does utilize the 25 feet, which is of course what the existing zone allows, this is how tall they would be. So you can see those 3. They represent where buildings would likely be located along the western edge of the subject property. So these will be the closest ones to First Avenue. So you can see they're off in the distance. They don't block the view of anything. Push Ridge is humongous compared to these, and they'd really only be blocking some of the immediate background behind them, not even the foothills. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is a panorama that I took from that closest home in the Villages Phase 2. So that was the basically 350 feet away from the subject property. It's a little confusing because there's about 180 degrees represented in this picture. So the left hand of the picture is looking basically north, and the right hand of the picture is looking south-southeast along that edge of homes. So again, the dominant view, the premium view is of Push Ridge. This will have no impact on it. You can see all of the grading out there. That's Villages Phase 3. Homes will be located out there. And then about a third of the way over from the left-hand side, you can see another little yellow pole. That is a 25-foot pole located at the southwest corner of the subject property, which is the closest that one of these buildings might be to this location. So again, you can see no visual impact. And of course, that pole represents what's allowed today in terms of building height. Next slide, please. Thank you. This is a slide that shows an old aerial photo that was taken shortly after ADOT took a bunch of dirt off this property as part of their Tangerine Road Bridge construction project. So the point I want to make here is just that this happened 20 some odd years ago. There's not a lot of mature vegetation on this property as a result. It's already fairly flat as a result. And we have a site resource inventory that's been prepared by a landscape architect that confirms a real lack of significant vegetation on this site. Next slide, please. Thank you. Trails was another question that came up. These trails here that were shown in red, you can see, of course, Palisades on the south. These trails coming up from the CDO Wash much further south, and allowing people access up to Kai Drive, and then by extension First Avenue and Tangerine, and then on the right side of the screen on the east side, past the existing cell tower, and then down into some of the big wash trails. The trail on the right is one that has been used roughly by a number of equestrian users over the year, and during the rezoning, we realized that was an important piece to preserve. So that is part of the overall trails plan. The red ones are approved as part of the rezoning. What we're proposing is that we want this subject property, regardless of which development option ends up being the best fit. We would like good connectivity to the trail system that's already been established in the area. So we're proposing to approach Pima County about acquiring a trail easement along the green line approximately, or at the very least, a short piece of it that would connect the subject property over to the red trails going down to Big Wash. And then of course, this subject property will have good access to Kai Drive, sidewalk there, over to the sidewalk and multi-use paths on First Avenue and beyond. Next slide, please. Or is that the last one? I think that's the last one. So I just want to thank everybody for their continued interest in this proposal. This downzoning makes a lot of sense from a long-term market perspective. It makes a lot of sense from a land use transition perspective. There's no existing neighbors, and it's sandwiched right there between medium density housing and commercial and major arterials. From an economic perspective, it'll help existing retailers, and it'll also generate some revenue for Oro Valley versus the existing zoning, which really has no foreseeable economic benefit if it stays as C1. There's really no negative impact to this proposal, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Oland. So I'll move along with the meeting now. Just make sure all my audio is on. So before we get started with your questions, as participants, I'd like to explain how you can all participate during this meeting. So during the question and comment period, if you wish to ask a question or make a comment, please raise your computer or telephone generated hand. And just to be clear, I don't mean literally raise your hand in the air. There's a specific computer or virtual feature in Zoom, and there are two ways to do this. So for those who are participating on any platform other than by phone, you'll want to find the participants icon, and this is located either at the top or bottom of your screen, depending on your device. So you'll click on the participants icon, and this will open a dialog box that lists all participants in the meeting. At the bottom of the participants box, you will see an option to raise your hand as shown on the right side of this slide. If you click on that, your hand will be raised. Alternatively, if you're using an iPad or tablet, you may have the option of selecting the three dots that say more as shown on this screen. If you select that, you will also have the option to raise your hand. Now, for those of you who are participating by phone, you'll want to press *9 to raise your hand. Raised hands will be moved to the top of the list in the order in which they were raised. I will then announce your name and turn off your mute so that you can speak, and also turn on your video. So please make sure that you are also not muted on your personal device and that your video is not turned off on your personal device. So be sure to use the microphone and video icon, which is shown on this slide, to make sure that you are unmuted and that your video is on when it's your turn to speak. When I announce who is up to speak, I will also announce the next person whose turn it will be to speak so that that person will be prepared. Now, once you've asked your question or made a comment, I will remute you to allow the speaker to provide an answer. And if you are having any technical issues with Zoom or have further questions about my Zoom participation instructions, our Constituent Services Coordinator, Jessica Hind, is at the ready to help. You can call Jessica at any time during the meeting at 229-4711 to request further assistance with Zoom. And we're going to do our best to get through as many questions and comments as possible tonight. And it looks like we have a number of participants, and we'll do our best to get to each of you. So please keep your comments or questions to no longer than 3 minutes out of fairness to all participants who wish to be heard. I will respectfully remind folks of this guideline as needed. My aim is to keep things moving along in a fair and efficient manner. Again, the goal of this meeting is to have a productive conversation about the project and provide constructive feedback and questions. So please keep that in mind as we move through the meeting tonight. Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and get started with your questions and comments. So please bear with me. It may take me a minute or two to just unmute folks, turn on video, move between our speakers. I'm also working on 2 screens here, so just bear with me. But it does look like we have 1 hand raised and no hand raised after that. So the first speaker is Mr. John Amato. Mr. Amato, I'm going to ask to unmute you. All right, Mr. Amato, you just want to make sure that you're not muted on your end as well. So if you can find that microphone icon, this one, there you go, perfect. Would you like your video on, sir?
No, it's not really working.
Oh, okay, so go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yeah, a couple of things. I noticed that apartments are proposed, as well as other types of dense structures for people to live in. I've been an appraiser in the past, and I know that these type of units tend to bring down the price of neighboring homes when they're individual dwellings. And also, of course, the higher density of people is not always welcomed. I know the property is zoned commercial, and it's been stated clearly that being commercial, that it's not easily visible, and in the area there are a number of commercial areas that aren't doing that well, but that's not really the homeowner's problem as far as getting it rezoned. I know that things, the mayor had run on the proposition that Oro Valley is just building and building, and without little concern for the overall effects of that. So I am resistant on the denser population in two-story types of apartments, on rentals, and so on, without little concern for that would generate the most money and profitability. But that isn't, again, that isn't, as a homeowner, our problem. I live here because I was enjoying the more open environment without a dense population. I moved away from dense population, not to get back into it, but to be away from it. And to have it then start building all around me again is just defeating why I came here to begin with. And again, I do know from experience that living around a lot of rentals and dense population of this type, the property values can decrease some. And you can argue that, but I've seen it. And I also was I worked in Carson City, Nevada as an appraiser there for the city. And I was one of the few that had gone through all the schools so they could get it done properly and correctly, and do valuations of homes and land and so on. And I saw where when they, it proved out that when they were near rentals and so on, the property values would go down. People, just like being right near a school, people tend to dislike the higher friction, the greater number of peoples. And that's basically it. I just, I didn't move here to start being built all around and have a higher density. And if it, the property isn't working well because of how it's zoned, that's, again, not really our problem.
All right, thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Amato. I'm just going to you. All right, and I'm gonna turn that question over to Mr. Paul Oland, again, who's representing the applicant. So Mr. Oland, I'm gonna find you here so I can unmute you, but can you please address the issues of property values and density and compatibility just around the surrounding neighborhoods?
Sure. Thank you. Well, I agree that the viability of the existing zoning is nobody's problem but the existing home landowners. There's absolutely no argument there. But the bigger problem in Oro Valley is that the retailers are struggling, which does have a negative impact on all residents. And to have a vibrant retail sector, we need more residences. So bringing in higher density residential products at appropriate locations such as this, which is already zoned for an even more intense use, will have a positive impact in that it will help those existing businesses serve everybody better, and it may even lead to opening of new businesses rather than shuttering them, which is all we seem to see anymore. As far as the impact on property values, sure, depending on where you are, a really lousy apartment complex nearby will absolutely have a negative impact on your property value. In Oro Valley, these apartment complexes are well kept, the rents are high, and I really don't expect a noticeable impact. Again, everything's balanced out by successive retail, and if you've got a really nice retail center that is able to be more successful, that is certainly an amenity that helps balance out any possible negative impact.
Great, thank you, Mr. Oland, for that response. All right, and I don't see any other hands. Seeing one just came up, Mr. Tim Bowen. So Mr. Bowen, just give me a moment here. I'm going to unmute you. All right, Mr. Bowen, would you like your video on?
No, thank you.
Okay, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Thank you. My name is Tim Bowen. I'm an Oro Valley resident. I have two questions. The first question is, what is the source of the data that was presented tonight that most Oro Valley apartment renters can actually afford Oro Valley homes. My second question for the applicant is, what is the reason why the economic analysis is not presented at the neighborhood meeting for the benefit of we residents, nor is it available to planning and zoning 2 months prior to their meetings? It would seem to me, in support of a project that's beneficial for Oro Valley, the sooner the economic analysis is presented by the applicant, the better for all of us. Thank you. Those are my questions.
Great, thank you, Mr. Bowen. Mute you. All right, and I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Paul Oland. So Mr. Oland, can you please address the source of the data as far as renting and home prices in Oro Valley, as well as the economic analysis? Okay, go ahead.
Sure, thank you. Well, the data source for my statements about apartment dwellers typically being affluent enough to afford homes is what we've been told by a number of apartment developers. I am sure that that data is available, and I will get it and provide it to the town. As far as the ability to release the economic analysis, I will do so as soon as it's done. We were asked for it about a week and a half ago. We immediately commissioned it and told the economic development company or economic analysis company that they needed to finish it yesterday. I'm being a little bit facetious, but we told them that they need to finish it very quickly. And the minute we have it, not only do we think it'll support what we're saying, but we will distribute it to town staff right away.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Oland. Okay, and we do have a hand raised by Vice Mayor Barrett. So Vice Mayor, I'm going to unmute you. Hi, Vice Mayor Barrett, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
All right. Yes, we can. Would you like your video on, Vice Mayor?
No, thanks. I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I don't normally participate in the neighborhood meetings, but I just had a quick follow-up question for the applicant. Who asked you to provide an economic impact analysis?
Okay, I'm going to mute you, Vice Mayor. And unmute Mr. Oland. Okay, Mr. Oland, go ahead, please.
Vice Mayor, your excellent planning staff suggested that I provide it because it will help justify what we're proposing, and it'll be some much needed data that should help council make a more informed decision.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Oland, for that response. All right, so I don't see any other hands raised right now, but we'll just give it another minute here to see if anybody else on the meeting has questions or comments about the proposal. Again, if you're calling in by phone, don't know if we have any of those tonight, but you can press *9 to raise your hand. If you're on your computer or tablet, just find the participants icon and you're able to raise your hand that way. All right, we do have one more raised hand, again for Mr. John Amato. So Mr. Amato, I'm going to unmute you. All right, you should be unmuted. Okay, go ahead whenever you're ready.
Yeah, how many more meetings will there be about this? That's my question.
Okay. Yeah, and I can address that. So if there are still substantial issues that have not been addressed by the applicant, we'll have one more at the end of this meeting, if that's determined. We'll have one more neighborhood meeting in September, and then that will be followed by 2 Planning and Zoning Commission meetings, which again are also opportunities for public participation. That will be in October and November, and then Town Council consideration in December. All right, and if anybody else has a question, okay, we do have one more raised hand. Just give me a moment here. It's Miss Carol. I apologize if I butcher your last name, but Macon or Mackin. So I'm going to unmute you. Okay, Carol, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, perfect. Would you like your video on?
No, thank you.
All right, go ahead whenever you're ready.
We are actually new to Oro Valley. We just moved into the villages of Silverhawk, and I have two questions that I'm uncertain as to how this process will continue from here. Is first of all, when will the decision be made to deciding on what types of buildings will be there? And second of all, is there some sort of vote from the community, or how does the community make it known, other than these meetings, that they are in agreement with the final decision?
Sure. I'm just gonna. All right. Yeah. No. Thank you for that question. So ultimately, the proposal will be considered by Town Council in December of this year, and that's required per state law for any major general plan amendment application. So at that time, the council can act on the proposal, whether it's approval, denial, or continuance. And opportunities for public participation. There's this meeting, of course. We may have another neighborhood meeting in September. Any public hearing before the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council is also an opportunity for public participation and to provide comments and voice concerns to the Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council. And of course, at any time, you can always email questions or comments or concerns to ask@orovalleyaz.gov. And so those will be collected, reviewed by staff, and they'll also be forwarded to Planning and Zoning Commission and Town Council as part of their meeting packets when the proposal is considered. So I hope that thoroughly answered your question. If not, you can definitely raise your hand again. So thank you. All right. Are there any other folks who would like to ask a question or provide a comment? All right, I'm just going to give it another minute here to provide folks the opportunity to raise their hand if you have any other questions or comments about the applicant's proposal. Again, if you're having any trouble on your end about raising your hand or anything to do with Zoom, you can call 229-4711 to speak with Jessica Hind, our Constituent Services Coordinator, and she'll be able to help you. All right, let's give it one more minute here. If anybody else has a question or comment, definitely raise your hand in Zoom. Let's give another 30 more seconds here. And again, you'll want to just, okay. Ms. Carol, we see you have your hand raised again. Okay, so I'm going to unmute you. All right, Carol, I think you're unmuted, so whenever you're ready.
I just want to make one last comment. We moved out here, very much like what the first gentleman had said. We moved out here because we wanted to be away from the city. And I would like to see the lower impact, whether it's single family homes or the senior care built out here, as opposed to more commercialized areas.
All right, thank you for that comment. All right, and I don't see any more hands raised. We'll just give another 10 seconds if anyone has any last minute questions, then we'll go ahead and move on with the meeting. All right, still not seeing any hands raised right now. So Ms. Sims, if we could get the presentation slide back up, please. All right, thank you. All right, so now that we're approaching the end of our meeting, I would like to sum the process up. So based on the questions and comments received at this neighborhood meeting, sounds like we will have one additional fully interactive Zoom neighborhood meeting in September. So again, please look out on, please look out for the notices for that meeting. If you haven't received one and would like one for the upcoming meeting, please email ask@oroValleyAZ.gov to be put on that mailing list to get those notices. So following the next fully interactive Zoom neighborhood meeting in September, there will be 2 Planning and Zoning Commission public hearings. And those will be in October and November. And then lastly, Town Council will consider the application in December at a public hearing. So again, the goal of this process has been and will continue to be to listen to everyone's questions and concerns. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so lastly, please continue to forward all questions and comments to ask@oroValleyAZ.gov and go to ovprojects.com to visit the project webpage, where we will continue to add new information as it becomes available. Again, we will have one fully interactive neighborhood Zoom meeting next month. So we'll, as soon as we know the date, and we'll put information on the project's webpage at ovprojects.com. As well as sending out notices and posting signs on the property. So just please attend that meeting and be on the lookout for those notices and information online. So I want to thank you all very much again for attending this meeting, especially right now during these unusual times. So thank you again for your time and have a great evening.